Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world. And so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much. And what an exciting story this is. And it begins in Venice. And I wonder what's going to happen because it's getting terribly exciting. But before we get into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And you've got to wonder, how does a story in Venice eventually lead to a Bigfoot encounter? We're about to find out, so let's continue with our story. The meal at the quaint little restaurant called Serafina de Marco had been absolutely sensational. Carrie had never tasted more delicious pasta in her entire life, and Serafina was exactly right. It melted in your mouth like butter. When she and Leonardo had arrived in Venice a couple of days earlier, she had phoned her parents to tell them where she was. She thought her father would be absolutely thrilled to learn she was in such a gorgeous location. On the contrary, he had sounded frantic on the other end of the phone, almost as if she had just announced that she had terminal cancer. There had been a profound sense of panic in his voice, and he had demanded to know at once where exactly they were staying. "I need to know the address of your hotel," he had said. "Me and your mother never knew you were going to Italy. You told us you were going to Canada. It's come as quite the shock to us to learn of this. How can you go off to another country in Europe without telling us where you were going?" Why was her father behaving so strangely, Carrie had wondered. The man sounded as if he had ants in his pants. "I'm here with Leonardo, Dad. Keep your hair on, will you? Leonardo wanted to show me around Venice, and his mother kindly paid for our trip, which was very generous of her. It was a lovely surprise. I knew nothing about it. Leonardo was born here in Venice. It's so spectacularly beautiful, Dad. You should see the Venetian architecture. It's out of this world. I wish you and Mum were here to see it all. You would absolutely love Venice." "But as I keep saying, why are you there, love?" Her father repeated the question, as if he wasn't completely satisfied with the vague answer that she appeared to have given him. "Me and your mother had no clue, as I was saying, that you were going to Europe. This was very sneaky and underhanded of your fiancé. I thought you said you were going away for a week to Canada. That's what you told us. But now you're on the other side of the world. This is crazy. What is going on, love? Is there something you're not telling us?" "It was a surprise, Dad," chuckled Carrie. "I didn't know Leonardo was taking me to Italy. He planned it all with the help of his mother. They were in on it together. He confiscated my passport and told me we were going to Canada, that's all. And I believed him, until I found myself on a flight to Italy. It was so romantic, Dad. I can hardly believe I'm here. I keep having to pinch myself over and over again. Don't be mad at Leonardo, Dad. It was so thoughtful of him to do this for me. And such a lovely surprise." "So he misled you, love? Surreptitiously took you to Italy, did he? Without our knowledge of this? If he was planning such an impromptu trip for you, he might have had the decent courtesy to tell us about his plans. You're telling me you want to marry this man? Are you insane, Carrie? You can't trust him." "Don't be ridiculous, Dad. I can't believe you're saying this. You're being so unreasonable, and you're certainly overreacting. There's nothing nefarious about this trip to Italy. We are here to enjoy ourselves, that's all. I'll be home in a week's time, and I'll tell you all about it. Is there anything you'd like me to bring you and Mum back from Venice? I can get you some pictures of the harbour if you like, that you can frame and put up in the kitchen. I'm sure Mum would like that. She always spoke fondly of Venice." "I'm sure your mother would like that very much, love. I would like a word with your fiancé, if I may," said Eric de Royson. "I want to speak to him in private. It's very important." "Dad, is this really necessary? You're not going to blow a gasket, are you, at Leonardo? He did a very beautiful thing bringing me here, and I don't want you to make him feel bad about this." "Of course I'm not going to blow a gasket at him. I'd just like to speak to him in private, if I may." Carrie handed her phone to Leonardo somewhat reluctantly. "It's my dad," she said apologetically, rolling her eyes in exasperation. "He's not happy you brought me to Venice. He's got a bee in his bonnet about it for some reason. You'd have thought he'd be happy for me, wouldn't you? But he sounds really pissed about it. I'm not used to him being all over the place like this. I can't think what on earth has got into him." Carrie sighed as she watched Leonardo disappear into the bathroom, with the cell phone pinned to his ear, and he closed the door very discreetly behind him. She could only imagine what her father was saying to Leonardo. He was probably having a right go at him. Why wouldn't her father realise she was a grown-up woman now? He kept treating her as if she was still a kid. She was 25 years old, for goodness sake. Yes, she still lived at home, but she had her own online business that was doing exceptionally well. And she was an independent woman in her own right. Her father interfering and meddling into her affairs, even if it was well-meaning, made Carrie feel as if she was right back at kindergarten again. It was humiliating, ridiculously so, having her father interfering like this. But for some reason, he really did not like Leonardo Angelinus, and she couldn't understand for the life of her why this was the case. In truth, he had never reacted like this towards any of her previous boyfriends that she had brought back home. But then again, the relationships that she had had with them had not been as intense as her relationship was with Leonardo. Maybe her fiancé was right, and her father just did not want to let her go. When Leonardo came out of the bathroom and handed her her cell phone back, he looked extremely happy, and almost gratified. "What are you looking so pleased about?" Carrie asked. "I'm quite sure my dad's just bitten your head off, hasn't he? But you look as if you've only gone and won the state lottery or something." "He did have quite the go at me," Leonardo admitted. "But you know me. Your father's rhetoric is like water off a duck's back to me. I don't care a jot what your father has to say. As far as I'm concerned, this is our life, and you're about to become my wife. So he's going to just have to put that in his pipe and smoke it, isn't he? He's not best pleased with me that I brought you here to Italy without informing him first. He said he wasn't surprised I'd done this. He said I was bankrupt of any decent manners or chivalry." Carrie groaned in exasperation. "You weren't mean to him, were you, Leonardo? This is my dad we're talking about. I know he can get on his high horse at times and rant a little, but he means well, and I really love him, Leonardo. I'm only sorry that, for reasons I just can't explain, he doesn't appear to like you at all. I so wish things were different, and that he could only see what I see in you. But he seems so blind-sighted about things." "Oh, don't worry your pretty head about your father," said Leonardo, taking Carrie into a big hug. "You worry too much, princess," he said, ruffling up her auburn hair affectionately. "I told your father that you're having a wonderful time with me here in Italy, and that I'm showing you all the sights. He wasn't remotely happy about it, of course, but there wasn't much he could do about it." "I can't understand why he's been so objectionable, so unreasonable," said Carrie. "I really can't. Why can't my dad be happy for me? He was never like he is with you, with my other boyfriends. It's so unfair." As Carrie thought about her father's rather unorthodox reaction to the news that she was in Venice when she had spoken to him last on her cell phone a couple of days earlier, she had felt a sizable twang of guilt as she reflected on that phone call. Leonardo and his kind mother had been so incredibly generous organising the surprise trip to Venice for her. But she knew by nature her father was a warrior, and learning she was on the other side of the world had all but ruffled his feathers. "Dad, I'm sorry," she said to herself under her breath, "but this is my life, and I'm the one that has to live it. It's not you. I know you mean well, but you can't live my life through me." That evening, after returning from the restaurant at Serafina de Marco, even though it was still early, Leonardo and Carrie were so incredibly exhausted and fatigued that they decided to retire to bed early, given that in the morning they had a busy itinerary stacked up with all kinds of sightseeing, so they knew they needed some quality sleep, so that they would be rearing to go in the morning. Carrie happily sank between the cool cotton sheets of her sumptuously cosy king-sized hotel bed, with her fiancé at her side. Leonardo was propped up against a very large pillow, reading a map. It would seem after overindulging in eating so much delicious hearty Italian fare that had been thrust upon them so generously by both Serafina and Marco. Carrie felt very contented. She had that full feeling in her stomach like you have after indulging in a big Thanksgiving meal. When your body is contentedly full and demands sleep so digestion can ensue. Before Carrie could even kiss her fiancé good night, she was out like a light. It was a while later that Carrie woke up when she heard a strange rattling noise in their hotel suite. Through blurry, squinting eyes, she looked up from over her bedsheets, only to see Leonardo standing in the corner of the room putting on a blue sweater. Carrie sat up abruptly, her eyes blinking. "What on earth are you doing, Leonardo?" she asked, sounding somewhat confounded. He looked as if he was about to go out on the town, when he was supposed to be in bed with her, sleeping off all the food they'd recently indulged in. They had agreed to have an early night. So what the hell was he doing up and about? She noted that there was an alarmed look on Leonardo's face when he realized that she had woken up. He was behaving rather furtively, rather like a kid who'd been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "Oh, love, you're awake, are you?" he said, sounding somewhat rattled. "Well, I am now," said Carrie. "You made quite the noise." "I'm sorry, love. I didn't mean to wake you. Go back to sleep, will you?" "Well, I'm awake now, aren't I? What time is it?" asked Carrie, glancing at her nightstand to see if she could see her cell phone. "It's 11:15, not that late. I think when we came back from Serafina de Marco, we were both so bushed. We both passed out, did we not? I have to say it must have been those 2 glasses of red wine and all that limoncello we drank that did it. We've been asleep for just under 2 hours, I suspect." "But then why are you dressed up, Leonardo, as if you're going out?" asked Carrie, unable to hide the surprise on her face. "I thought we both agreed we were going to have an early night, as we have a packed itinerary in the morning. But you look as if you've got ants in your pants all of a sudden." "Silly me," said Leonardo somewhat lamely. "I have to tell you I got a message from Serafina on my cell phone. Would you believe it? I've only gone and left my credit card at Serafina de Marco, so I'm going back there to pick it up. It's only 15 minutes away. I won't be long. No more than half an hour. You go back to sleep, will you? I'm sorry to have disturbed you like this." Carrie sat up so straight that her back would have rivaled a pencil. "But why would you leave your credit card at Serafina de Marco? That lovely couple insisted on giving us the meal on the house because we're celebrating our wedding. Well, our engagement, really. So why would you leave your credit card there if you didn't even have to pay for the meal? It makes no sense at all." "I know, love, but I did take my credit card out of my wallet, if you remember, because I was intent on paying for the meal. I didn't want them to give it to us for free. But, as usual, Serafina and Marco refused to let me pay for anything. And I guess I just forgot to put the credit card back in my wallet. I left it on the table and forgot all about it. But I think I ought to go and get it, don't you?" "No, not really. I'm sure you can trust Serafina and Marco to look after it for you. Why do you need to get it now? You can go there in the morning to pick it up." "Well, how can I put it, princess? I would rather have my credit card on my person. Things like that can so easily get lost. The last thing I need is to lose my credit card on this trip. Besides, I think a little bit of fresh air will do me the world of good. I suddenly feel quite energized. I could burn off some of the excesses of the food I ate earlier this evening. After all, I want to keep my body looking good for my wife-to-be, don't I?" he said, giving her a naughty wink. "You wouldn't want me to let myself go, would you, love?" "As if that's ever going to happen, Leonardo. You're far too vain to get fat. Hold on a second. How about I come with you? We can get some fresh air together. It'll also do me good." "Don't be silly, love. That's a bad idea. You need your beauty sleep. Go back to bed. We've got a big day ahead of us tomorrow, with plenty of sightseeing, and I don't want you getting overtired. I've had it all planned out for us. Is there anything I can get you at the late-night supermarket? I think it will still be open." "I don't need anything," said Carrie. "You're right. I probably should go back to sleep. But promise me you won't be long. No more than half an hour. I don't want the bed getting cold without you in it," she teased. "I won't be longer than half an hour, I promise," Leonardo assured her. "You'll barely know I've been missing." Carrie awoke with a start to a lonely, very quiet hotel room. She turned around to observe Leonardo's side of the bed. which she discovered was both empty and cold, suggesting he had failed to return to the hotel suite. She fumbled awkwardly to reach for her cell phone on the nightstand to read the time, and visibly gasped when she realized it was already 3 a.m. in the morning. It had been 4 hours since Leonardo had gone off to get his credit card from Serafina DeMarco, and the quaint little restaurant was only 15 minutes away. He should have been back ages ago. Something was amiss. She could feel it in her guts. Carrie began to frantically text Leonardo, demanding to know whereabouts he was, but all her calls kept going to voicemail, which was exceedingly frustrating for her. She clenched her teeth together in indignation and growled, "Where the hell are you, Leonardo? I've tried to text you 6 times, and you're still not answering." He had not so much as left her a single message to tell her of his whereabouts, which was most unusual and unorthodox of him. Something did not feel right about all of this. She could taste the nausea welling up in the back of her throat that made her physically want to gag, as the taste of the limoncello on the back of her throat suddenly became obnoxiously bitter. Where the hell was her fiancé? And why the hell did he have to go off in the middle of the night like this just to pick up a stupid credit card from Serafina DeMarco? She persuaded herself that maybe Serafina and Marco had invited Leonardo to stay on at the restaurant to enjoy a few drinks with them, and perhaps they'd been drinking late into the night. Italians were socially engaged kind of people, she thought, and maybe that is what had happened. Perhaps Leonardo had lost all track of time, and had drunk way too much, and had physically passed out on the couple's sofa. It would not be the first time that this had happened, and Serafina and Marco were very good friends with Leonardo's family, so Leonardo was like family to them. These were the reassurances that kept playing out in her mind, to soothe the inflamed foreboding that offered her no solace, for her mind kept misbehaving as it began to toy with her by throwing out all kinds of horrific scenarios for her to unwillingly digest. Her heart began to judder as every cell in her body trembled in trepidation. "Get a grip," she told herself very firmly. "I'm sure there's a perfectly innocent explanation as to why Leonardo's not back yet." For a moment she paced the hotel suite up and down as she pondered what she should do. Carrie knew that she could not wait in the hotel room a moment longer for Leonardo to get back. Her patience was wearing thin. And what if something dreadful had happened to him? She needed to find Leonardo at once, and when she did so, she'd give him hell for putting her through so much grief, on their 3rd night in Venice of all things. Leonardo would have to learn very fast and hard that Carrie was not the kind of woman who would tolerate a man who did not let her know of his whereabouts. Where the hell was he? She scrambled awkwardly towards the closet, throwing on a loose-fitting pair of sweatpants and a sweater. She didn't bother to even glance at her rather bedraggled reflection in the mirror, with the smeared makeup on her face that she had failed to wash away from earlier on in the evening. She hurriedly grabbed her purse and sashayed out of the door, making her way to the reception desk downstairs to ask if any messages had been left to her by her fiancé. Carrie decided that the quickest way to get to the reception area was to take the glass lift to the ground floor. Soon she was at the reception desk. She could see that a very elegantly attired debonair Italian gentleman, with spunky black hair and kind dark eyes, was sitting behind a computer. He smiled up at her warmly. A faint glimmer of surprise on his face was very discernible, as no doubt he was somewhat taken aback by Carrie, being up and about at this ungodly time of the night. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" he asked her politely. "I don't think so. No, it's not. It's definitely not all right," she said nervously, her nose twitching, her voice almost strangled by the mounting hysteria that was welling up in her gut, like an out-of-control tsunami wave. The front desk manager stood up abruptly from behind his seat. His earnest eyes fixed themselves steadily on Carrie. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked. "Would you like me to get you a glass of water, perhaps? You look, very pale." "I'm fine," said Carrie, knowing all too well that fine she most certainly was not. She trembled for a moment and said, I was wondering, did my fiancé, Leonardo Angelinus, from room 263, did he by any chance leave a message for you at the reception desk?" "No, ma'am. We have no messages this evening, I'm afraid." I'm very sorry, but we don't. But are you sure? Absolutely sure? Yes, ma'am. I'm very sure. You didn't by any chance see my fiancé leaving this evening? Round about 11ish, I believe it was. I've got a photograph I can show you of him. I can show it to you now. It's on my cell phone. It's a picture of Leonardo on a gondola that we were on earlier on today. Oh, yes, said the manager, leaning over to inspect the cell phone and examine the photograph. Yes, I remember your fiancé. He was wearing a blue sweater this evening, with white chinos. Is that right? Got curly black hair, quite tall, I think. Italian? Yes, that's him, said Carrie, hope beginning to spark in her heart. Her eyes lit up for a second. So you did see him then? Well, I was on duty, ma'am, when your fiancé left the hotel. I said good evening to him, but he was very distracted. He appeared to be in a rush. It was about 11 o'clock, I think, but I'm afraid to say he never returned back to the hotel. If he had done so, I would have definitely seen him. I've been on duty all evening. Oh, no! I can't believe this, said Carrie, putting her hands on her head. This is crazy. He went to a small little restaurant owned by friends of his Italian family. It's only 15 minutes away from here. Serafina DeMarco is the name. He went to pick up a credit card he'd left behind. He said he wouldn't be gone long. He said he'd be only 30 minutes. But he's not back yet. He left at 11. What am I going to do? It's been 4 hours. Nobody's away for that long, are they? The manager nodded. Serafina DeMarco. I know the place well. Don't panic, ma'am. You say he went to pick up this credit card from the owners of the restaurant that are old friends of the family. Is that right? Yes, that's right. But he hasn't texted me or anything. It's not like him not to contact me. He doesn't do things like that. I'm so worried about him. What if something dreadful has happened to him? Maybe, ma'am, your fiancé stayed on with these friends of his for drinks, perhaps. Forgot to contact you, to tell you of his whereabouts. Maybe his cell phone ran out of energy, and he failed to contact you. I'm sure there is a plausible explanation as to why he's not in contact with you yet. Of course, you're right, said Carrie. That must be it. I'll go and see if I can find him. Before the front desk manager could protest and probably advise her not to go out at this insane time of night, Carrie had already dashed out of the hotel. The streets of Venice were well lit up at night, so Carrie navigated her way rather gingerly down the streets that they'd walked down earlier on in the evening, and was surprised by how good her memory was. Because if you didn't know where you were going, you could be walking down a maze of long alleyways. But Carrie remembered some very distinctive landmarks. Before long she'd walked down the arched alleyway that led to Serafina DeMarco. The restaurant was closed, but Carrie banged on the door and called up to the windows above the restaurant where the couple resided. Marco! Marco! Serafina! Are you awake? Marco! Serafina! She shouted out. And moments later a very tired Marco, with sleep congealed in his eyes, leaned over the balcony railings, looking down at Cassie. He recognized her at once, and managed a smile. Hello, Carrie. Is that you? Sorry to disturb you, Marco, at this time of night. I know it's insane. I just wouldn't do this. Normally, I mean. But you haven't seen Leonardo, have you? He never returned to the hotel. He said he was coming to pick up his credit card at your restaurant, but he never returned home. I'm so worried about him. He appears to have gone missing. I can't find him anywhere. Leonardo was here. He was here at 11:30 to pick up his credit card. We persuaded him, well, we tried to have a drink with us. But he told us he couldn't stay. He needed to get back to the hotel. Marco looked puzzled. You say he has not returned? No, he hasn't, said Carrie, her face growing white. I'm so worried, Marco. What should I do? I'm coming down, said Marco. Just you wait there. I'll wake up the wife. Moments later, a very concerned, somewhat bewildered Marco and Serafina both in their dressing gowns, were fussing around Carrie. They insisted on calling the police for her, that promptly arrived a couple of minutes later, asking Carrie all kinds of questions of which she had no answer to. All she could tell them was that Leonardo had come to Serafina DeMarco to pick up a credit card and never returned back to the hotel. "So you say, ma'am," said the officer, who spoke reasonably good English, "that your husband never returned to the hotel?" "No, he didn't," said Carrie, handing her cell phone to the officer. "See, I've been texting him all night. There's absolutely no answer. The phone keeps going to voicemail." It must have been 4:10 in the morning when a search was fully conducted by the police in the local area, looking for the whereabouts of Leonardo, but nobody could find any sight or sound of him. Finally, they persuaded Carrie to return to her hotel, and they would keep her updated on any developments. But the last thing Carrie wanted to do was to go to bed, when her fiancé was still missing. But exhaustion beckoned her, rather like a demanding old friend, that simply refused to take no for an answer. The kind gentleman in the reception had sent her up some chamomile tea to her hotel suite, and assured her that he was sure everything would be fine, and that there was a plausible explanation for her fiancé's disappearance. His kind, reassuring words did very little to ease the discomfort in Carrie's heart, because she knew deep inside herself very instinctively that something was dreadfully wrong. She woke up the following morning at about 8 o'clock, when the bright light of a Venice day flooded the hotel suite. She believed for a moment that the events of the previous night had all been a very lucid dream, but then she sat bolt upright and realized that her dream had indeed been real, and that the events of last night were far from illusory. She glanced at her fiancé's side of the bed, that was still cold to the touch, and knew at once that he had never returned to their hotel suite in the later hours of the morning. Where the hell was he, and how did he manage to get lost in a city like Venice, that he knew so very well? Suddenly the hotel room with its glass coffee table, platter of fruit and bottle of unopened champagne, alongside the landscape portraits of Venice canals on the wall, suddenly felt so desperately lonely, and in that moment Carrie did what she always did when she hit rock bottom. She contacted her parents.
"Hello, sweetheart," came her father's voice. "This is a lovely surprise. You phoning so bright and early. How is Venice this morning, may I ask?"
Dad, something just terrible has happened."
"What is it, sweetheart? You're sounding unduly alarmed. Is everything all right with you?"
"No, nothing is all right." Carrie could hardly hide the wail in her voice. Dad, Leonardo's missing."
"What do you mean, missing, love?"
"Dad, he never returned to the hotel room last night. We went out to eat at a small restaurant called Serafina DeMarco, not far from the hotel. It's about 15 minutes away. Leonardo knows the people there very well, because they're friends of his family. The people who own the restaurant, I mean. He left his credit card there. It was about 11 o'clock, and he wanted to go and get the credit card from them. So he persuaded me to stay in our hotel suite because I was already sleeping. But he never came back last night. He did go to Serafina DeMarco to pick up his credit card, I know that much. But he never returned to the hotel, and no one has seen him. I contacted the police. They did a search, but nobody has found him, and there's been no news. Dad, I'm freaking out. What am I supposed to do?"
"Don't you worry, love. We'll be with you in 2 minutes. We wanted to surprise you. We arrived in Venice yesterday evening. We're staying in a hotel in walking distance to yours."
"You're here in Venice? Are you kidding me, Dad? You came all the way to Venice?" "Why did you come?" asked Carrie, not really caring about the answer, as knowing she'd see her parents shortly brought her monumental relief.
"We were extremely worried about you, love, being whisked off to Venice like that. Leonardo had made no mention of taking you overseas. It all seemed extremely secretive to us, and very last minute. Me and your mother, we smelt a rat. We were very scared you were going to rush off and get married in a private ceremony to Leonardo, and come back only to tell us you were now a married woman. I know Leonardo doesn't like me as much as I don't like him, So I thought he had plans to arrange a wedding for you behind our backs, so that he could purposely disclude us from the ceremony. We did not want that to happen. I guess we panicked. You're our girl. We don't want to miss out on any important choices you make in life, and getting married is one of them. We wanted you to know, love, that if you really love Leonardo as you say you do, and want to marry him and spend the rest of your life with him, you have our blessing. I may not particularly like him, but if he makes you happy, who am I to judge? Your mother was so terrified you'd come back to America married, and telling us you had to have a private ceremony because you didn't want us around, as we had failed to accept Leonardo in the family. So that's why we boarded a flight to Italy, and here we are.
So there we are. That is the end of part 2 of our story. Part 3 is tomorrow night. I look forward to you joining me then. Isn't it getting very exciting? Until next time, goodbye and good night.